Hello, I'm Terry Christensen, and this is Valley Politics. Today, Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone will brief us on his job, how property tax bills are calculated, where the money goes, and his views on reform of Proposition 13. Later, we'll hear what some residents have to say about property tax reform, and then Councilmember Dev Davis will tell us what's going on in Council District 6. That's Willow Glen. We'll conclude with part one of our interview with Becky Morgan, county supervisor and then state senator from 1985 to 1993. She was one of the last Republicans this area elected to state government, and she served in an era when bipartisanship still functioned. That's what's coming up on Valley Politics. Welcome everyone, and welcome Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone. Elected in '94, re-elected 6 times, most recently in 2018. Longtime servant of the county and of the public. The county tax assessor is an interesting role. As you know, you're usually booed. Yeah, of course.
You don't boo me, you don't know me, and that's the worst thing for a politician.
And it's good-natured booing. It's
yes,
teasing.
I hope so.
But there was a time when people would have seriously booed the county assessor. The assessor has the discretion of affecting your tax bill. You don't have so much discretion anymore, but they used to. Yeah. And in fact, used to be feared and loathed as part of the political machines. Right. Because they could affect people. People who supported the machines would get a good assessment. People that opposed the machine, a bad assessment. Those days are gone. Yeah. Aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, they're virtually gone.
So I can be rude to you, and you're not going to change my assessment.
I just follow the law, you know.
Tell us what the assessor does and how you come to assess properties.
I'll oversimplify here, but the assessor is responsible for identifying all assessable property in the county. That includes single-family homes and condos and businesses and offices and shopping centers and so forth, to determine the value of that and apply and make an assessment, just like a bank would do when you go in for an appraisal. Also, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, we also assess what's called business personal property. These are machinery, equipment, computers, fixtures, all the things that go inside of commercial property.
And that's a lot of equipment in Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, it's about $35 billion worth of accessible property is not bricks and mortar, it's stuff inside.
So once the assessment is set, that sets a value on a property.
Right.
And then 1% is a 1% tax rate is applied to that. That's the tax bill.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick overview of where the money goes once it gets collected?
Sure. This is the number one question I get asked, and I'm surprised why more people don't know what it is. But I have to admit, when I came to the assessor's office, I didn't know where it went either. Basically, almost half of all property tax revenue generated goes to public education, to the schools. In our county, it's 44%. 18% of it comes to the county itself to fund county programs. About 14% goes to the 15 cities in the county. It varies by city for something I never understood. 10% of that used to go to redevelopment agencies, and then when the governor and the legislature eliminated redevelopment agencies, it still goes there to pay down the debt of the redevelopment agencies. And something like 7 or 8% goes to community colleges, and 5 or 6% goes to special districts. So that's how it's allocated.
I suspect most people, I thought more went to cities. And it's actually a fairly small percentage that goes to cities, which is why they become dependent on sales taxes and other forms of permit fees and things like that to get by. So the assessment trend in Santa Clara County has been on rapid rise. I think it was $300 billion 10 years ago, and it's over $500 billion now.
Well, let me give you what's happened in my 24 years as the assessor.
That's good. That's a good.
I'm constitutionally required by the California Constitution to close the assessment roll every July 1st, based upon values January 1st. So we kind of worked from January 1st to July 1st to prepare the assessment roll. The first assessment roll I closed on July 1st, 1995. The total assessed value of all real and business personal property was 115 billion.
24 years ago?
24 years ago. The one I just closed last month here was 516 billion. So that's a lot of its growth, a lot of its, resale of existing properties, which we then reassess according to Proposition 13 to market value. And a lot of it's just growth in Silicon Valley, both in bricks and mortar and, as I said, business property.
Google's been buying tons of property downtown, maybe $400 million worth now. So every single time they buy a property, that assessment comes up to the sale price, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's certainly higher than 400 million.
It's more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus they've been buying in Sunnyvale and Mountain View and so on. All that contributes to the
right. And the thing about Google is they paid fair market value for all the properties they bought, and a big chunk of that was property they bought from the city of San Jose at fair market value. So the city made money off the transaction because they'd owned it before the tremendous.
The city made money on the sale, and then the sales tax, the property tax revenue.
Yeah. So unlike Amazon, who does these competitive projects all over the, ask for concessions and tax reductions and all that stuff, Google hasn't asked for a thing.
So property assessments on homes are pretty straightforward. It's the most recent sale price.
Right.
Mine was 1977. I'm a Prop 13 beneficiary, big time, over the years. But it must be trickier to set assessments on commercial and industrial property, especially on the tech companies and their equipment. And also, they resist your assessments significantly. It's, I think, millions of dollars of assessed value being appealed. I know you're in a lawsuit with the 49ers over the assessment of the stadium. What's going on there? Are they just flexing their corporate muscle? Is it really that hard to achieve an assessment people can agree
Well, for
with?
a standard shopping center office building, it's not. I mean, the value is based upon the revenue it produces. So a commercial property that generates more revenue for them, I'm talking about rents and leases and so forth, is worth more than one that does not. So, but so many of the properties around here are unique. The least of which is the Apple spaceship.
Yeah.
So those are more difficult. And then, of course, a lot of the assessment appeals are not around buildings. They're around business personal property, which is much more vague, if you will, than real property. And they do. But right today, we have about 5,000 active appeals in our office.
5,000?
5,000. That's pretty low for a county our size. The value in dispute, in other words, the difference between what the taxpayer says it should be assessed for and what we have it on the rolls for, is $80 billion, just in dispute. That would be, if we were unsuccessful on all those, would be an $800 million tax refund. But 56% of that $80 billion is with 10 companies.
10 big companies.
Yeah, I mean, you know them.
Yeah.
You would know their
Apple's
names.
#1.
Yeah, and they're all companies that everybody knows and identifies with. So the real risk, value in dispute, value at risk, is in those 10 companies. So, for example, Apple's is in dispute $10 billion. That's a $100 million property tax refund with one company. So you can see where the risk is, and that's what makes it different, because we're Silicon Valley with all these very expensive companies.
So you fight this out. Who decides whether you've assessed correctly or not?
We have 3 assessment appeals boards, which are independent of the assessor's office. Primarily, we encourage the board to appoint people that are high level, appraisers with an MAI, real estate lawyers that have experience in real estate, CPAs that have business value experience, because again, of the complexity of what we have. And the taxpayer makes an argument, files an appeal, makes an argument, we defend our appeal, and we're pretty successful. Last year we retained 96% of the value at risk. So it's because, you know, we're good at what we do. I mean, I have a great staff, very experienced folks. And you mentioned the Levi Stadium appeal. I'm not actually suing the team, suing the Assessment Appeals Board, who we believe made, you know, first time it's ever been done since 1993. We made an accurate assessment. The Assessment Appeals Board, in our opinion, made a bad decision. And so my only recourse is to sue the Assessment Appeals for their decision.
Interesting, but that's a very impressive success rate on appeals for your office. Yeah. Well done. So we have to talk about Prop 13 a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Back in 1978, it was passed, a time of rapidly inflating home values, which meant tax bills were going up every year and surprising a lot of people, affecting senior citizens on fixed incomes particularly seriously. It gets passed by 60% plus with the voters. It immediately reduced revenues for local governments.
By 52%.
By 52%. State balanced some of that out for schools. That's one reason schools get such a big chunk of the property tax, because it kind of got redistributed. Cities and counties were hurt most. Homeowners, longtime homeowners like you and me, benefited substantially. Newer purchasers pay at the newer purchase price. So I have neighbors who are paying 8 times in property taxes what I pay.
It could be as high as 15 times.
15 times, so that's an issue. And then the other issue is commercial property and industrial property doesn't turn over as rapidly, doesn't get sold and reassessed as rapidly as residential property. So I think ever since Prop 13 passed, we've been talking about fixes for Prop 13, but it really hasn't been changed in any substantial way. Right now there's a split roll proposal being processed and debated, which would separate commercial and industrial property from residential. What do you think about the prospects of reform generally and about that specific?
Well, I did not vote for Proposition 13. I wouldn't vote for it again today. I think it was two of the worst things that ever happened to California. And I know that there's tremendous disparity. Before Proposition 13 passed, 60% of the property tax burden in the state was borne by commercial industrial property owners and 40% by residential property. That's completely flipped. So it's unfair. But the split roll proposal that's headed for the ballot would be impossible, not difficult, but impossible to people, for assessors to implement. There is an alternative. And the alternative is something called a split rate rather than a split roll. In other words, just simply change the property tax rate from 1% to something, 1.2, 1.3, whatever the proponents think they can get passed by the voters of the state of California. Simple to do, could happen overnight, wouldn't change the inequities of Proposition 13.
Constitutional amendment.
Yeah, it would.
Right,
But it wouldn't change the inequities of Proposition 13, but it would generate the revenue for the schools, and it would require commercial industrial property owners to pay more. So that's possible to do. The split roll proposal as proposed would be impossible to do. They're trying to exempt all kinds of things. I mean, I can tell you that we project, you know, I get 3,000 to 4,000 appeals a year, which is low. During the Great Recession, I got 12,000 appeals in 2009, 10,000 in 2010. We project that the assessment appeals would go up because any commercial industrial property owner that owned a property before 2006 would appeal. We'd get 30,000 assessment appeals in the first year. Now, we had a tough time handling 12,000 during the Great Recession. We had to shift appraisal resources in my office away from enrolling new construction and changes of ownership over to the defense of assessment appeals. And so we weren't generating real dollars.
Yeah.
We were defending the dollars we had.
So that's an extremely complicated issue,
Yeah.
and maybe we better do another show on that.
I'd love to do that, yeah.
We have about a minute left, but
Okay.
I have to ask you to change your hat now. You're no longer the county assessor.
Okay.
You're Larry Stone, the political prognosticator.
Yeah.
I know you're always involved in presidential campaigns. You always have been. What do you think about what's going on? Do you have a candidate in this presidential election?
Well, I've endorsed and raising money for Mayor Buttigieg. You know, I love most of the Democrats that are up there, and no matter what happens, I'm all in for whatever Democrat gets the nomination. But I think young people, you know, the success the Democrats had in 2018 was we got more young people out to vote. We need to keep those folks. I don't think, so I think he's a young guy, very smart, very distinguished, and genuine.
Well, he's impressed a lot of people very rapidly. I guess this is another one we need to do another show on because we're out of time. Bye. Larry Stone, thank you very much for being with us today.
I enjoyed being here. Thanks, Terry.
Good. Now let's hear what some locals have to say about property tax reform. And then San Jose Councilmember Dev Davis will brief us on her Willow Glen Council District.
I think in this day and age, the Prop 13 needs to be reformed. However, it needs to be balanced and equitable, spread across both residential as well as commercial and business enterprises.
I think it needs to be looked at. And I think one of the reasons is because corporations are really benefiting a lot from Prop 13, and it really wasn't intended for them.
Absolutely. Prop 13 has been bad for our state. It's been bad for schools. It's been bad for after-school programs. It should absolutely be reformed.
Hello, I'm Councilmember Dev Davis, representing City Council District 6, which includes the Willow Glen, Rose Garden, Buena Vista, Midtown, Cahill, Shasta-Hanchett, Corey, Sherman Oaks, Santana Row, and Willow Creek neighborhoods. Some things I'd like to share with you that are happening in District 6 include one of the most exciting projects to happen in San Jose, the Google Village near Diridon Station. Many people don't realize that most of the proposed Google project will be built within the District 6 borders, but the benefits will be felt citywide. This project will contribute millions of dollars of tax revenue annually and tens of thousands of jobs to a city that comes up short on both every year. Working with Google representatives over the past months has confirmed to me that they are a company that wants to do right by our community. Thousands of their workers already call San Jose home. Those workers want and should be able to shorten their commute by riding transit, bicycling, or walking to work. This is the kind of company we want to grow in San Jose, one that becomes part of our urban fabric in an environmentally friendly way. As our city grows, we are creating walkable communities through the development of our urban villages. District 6 has 3 approved urban village plans: the Alameda, West San Carlos, and Santana Row Valley Fair. These plans allow denser and higher buildings with mixed-use sites, where neighborhood services and jobs are within walking and bicycling distances from homes. Some of the first urban village projects are currently underway in District 6. And we can't talk about District 6 without mentioning our great parks. Last year, we opened an award-winning section of the Three Creeks Trail from Co to Minnesota Avenues, providing a protected bike and walkway through a busy section of Willow Glen. This is part of an eventual 100-mile trail network through our city. Construction will begin soon on the Lincoln Glen Park, an all-inclusive playground where residents of all abilities can exercise and enjoy physical fitness opportunities. Del Monte Park Phase 2 has been completed with new soccer fields, shaded picnic areas, and a dog park. Sign up for my newsletter on the District 6 website to keep up to date on what's going on. Thank you.
Now here's our interview with Becky Morgan, who served on the County Board of Supervisors from 1980 to 84, and then in the state Senate until 1993. Becky Morgan, welcome to Valley Politics.
Thank you very much, Terry.
So 4 years as county supervisor and then state senator. What got you into politics in the first place? What inspired you to run? I know you were on a school board first.
Well, there's a little bit of Irish in me, and I liked being in the community and talking. I saw my father get great satisfaction now being a school board member and what they called select men back in Vermont.
Yeah.
And I like to solve problems, and I like to be of service.
And why county in particular to start with?
Well, I really started with the Palo Alto School Board,
yes.
and then I got recruited to the county when Jerry Steinberg was retiring. And the county appealed to me because it was local, but the issues to be dealt with were things that I felt I had some background in: children, transportation, and just the ability to work with just 3 other people, but in an important county, a very important county.
Yeah, county board's only 5 people, and when you joined the board, 3 of them were women. And
Yes.
you were on the board in the early 80s when San Jose and Santa Clara Valley were named by themselves, by ourselves, I think, as the feminist capital of the United States. A majority of women on the city council. I think Leona Eglund was in the state assembly, 3 women on the board. Did that make a difference for how decisions were made, that you were majority women?
Well, I think we sometimes focused on different things. I think it was important that we were able to hire a woman as county executive, Sally Reed.
Sally Reed, yeah.
While there were differences in how we approached things, we were able to divide up the things we cared about. Sally met with us regularly, so there were no surprises to her or to us for the most part. And there was never harshness that I see so much of today in politics. That we did work pretty well together, and the 2 men, Rod Dearden and Dan McCorkerdale, that were there were never unkind. They might disagree with me, they might argue with me, they might tease me about my vote, but they were not unkind. And I see so much unkindness today.
Yeah, you were the only Republican on the board too.
That was true.
But was that ever a problem?
It only showed up around union issues and around some of the budget decisions, which were some of my philosophy and values and my business background and desire to make sure the budget stayed balanced came in. I mean, we had some people that wanted to sell the plants and put in a plug figure to try to balance the budget. I didn't quite approve of those kinds of activities. But it was pretty congenial, considering the split in gender and politics.
What were the most controversial issues during your time on the board?
A small one, actually, I remember, was whether or not to sell the county golf course. And I think there were some things happening under the table that I never was quite aware of. But that became quite feisty, actually. So that was one that surprised me.
Was it sold?
And it was sold, and it was. Of course, it was always an issue. Valley Medical Center seemed to always come in over budget by about $2 million.
Yeah.
And that was when we had a $60 million budget, not a $1 billion budget.
Wow, that's a big difference. And you were dealing with post-Prop 13. Prop 13 passed in '78. You're on the board. You get elected in 1980. So there were budget challenges every year, I expect.
Yes, in 1982, I believe, was the one that was the worst, where we were having to make significant cuts. And I remember saying to Sally Reed at the time, I never knew I was going to have to play God here. I took the job to be of service, or ran for the job to be of service, but we were having to decide between foster children and abused women and just some really tough decisions.
Yeah, so much of county is social services and healthcare services for people who need those services.
That's
that
right.
makes the cuts really painful.
Yep.
Well, what was your greatest accomplishment on the board? What are you most proud of?
In Santa Clara County Board, there's some tangibles.
Yeah.
Route 85 had been a dotted line on a county map for over 20 years. And
people probably can't even imagine the county without
85.
it now.
No, but I was the one that pulled together representatives from each of the cities along the intended route. And it was painful, but fortunately, only about 15 houses had to be condemned and moved to make the road happen. And I can't even imagine today what the residential streets would be like without Route 85 on the way to Carmel and Pebble Beach and all. So that was good. And then the new jail needed to be built, and I chaired that effort and visited other counties and negotiated with Mayor Janet Gray Hayes about the fact that it needed to be in San Jose and where it would be, and which is the current location. And of course it was the children's shelter that I helped initiate and was completed under the leadership of Supervisor Diane McKenna and her husband Regis.
Those are some pretty big accomplishments for 4 years.
Well, I love projects.
Yeah. So the next project was getting elected to the state senate, and you did get elected in 1984.
Yes.
Served till 93, re-elected twice.
Yes.
When you went to the state senate, women were not a majority.
That's for sure.
There were 4 out of 40.
Oh, yes.
And I know you made news for wearing pants in the chambers.
You researched that one.
I did.
Yes. And that pantsuit is in the archives somewhere up in Sacramento.
The pantsuit is in the archives?
It was totally unintended.
Oh,
and
really?
it was a cold January morning, and I had this new wool pantsuit, and I was fascinated that the person that came to me to question it, because I was the first woman to wear pants on the Senate floor, and it was a woman, a female reporter, who came to question me. It was happenstance, and I have many, many women have come up to me since and said, thank you. We can now wear slacks. We are out of the pantyhose, and it's so much more comfortable, and we appreciate it.
Well, you made history.
Other ways are more important, but that has been significant for many women.
Other than breaking those rules, what were your main things you focused on?
I thought when I went to the Senate that I'd really focus on education, and I was on the Education Committee and got through legislation to reduce class size from 25 to 30 down to under 20, but there wasn't enough money to do it everywhere. But what I ended up spending more effort on was saving Caltrain from San Jose to San Francisco. Governor Dew didn't want to be in the transit business and was going to close it.
So the state was operating?
The state was in contract with Southern Pacific.
To operate a commuter service along the Caltrain, what we call Caltrain.
Caltrain area. And I knew as soon as the train stopped running, that space would become commercial and residential, and we'd never have a train. At that time, about 17,000 people were riding the train. Now over 70,000 people ride it every day, and I'm pleased that we were able to save it.
Well, this would be a very different valley without Highway 85 and Caltrain. How did you save it?
I introduced legislation to set up a joint powers agreement between the 3 counties, Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Francisco, to run the train, and then negotiated with Southern Pacific to sell it to their contract to the state and to help us make the transition. And so the joint powers agreement was set up, and I was 1 vote short to get my legislation passed, and I went to Speaker Willie Brown, and he said, you'll have your votes. And that
but he's Speaker of the Assembly.
Yes, but
and you're in the Senate.
But legislation has to go to both houses and then to the governor to
You're
be
1
passed.
vote short in both houses?
I was 1 short vote in the Assembly.
In the Assembly, I see. And of course, he's from San Francisco.
That helped.
Where the train goes.
But I think also the point I want to make is those were the days when people helped each other.
So people should remember he was a very liberal Democrat.
Absolutely.
You were a moderate Republican in the state Senate.
But he saw the purpose, and he respected the fact that I was carrying it, and got me the last vote I needed to make the joint powers agreement happen.
And Governor Dew, a Republican, didn't want to. We'll be back next month with an all-new Valley Politics, including part 2 of our interview with Becky Morgan. Meanwhile, you can catch up on previous shows on our website at creatvsj.org or on YouTube by searching for CreaTV San Jose. And you can let us know what you think about our show and suggest future topics or guests by email at valleypolitics@creatvsj.org or on Twitter at @valley_politics and by following us on Facebook. And now that's all, folks. Thanks for watching Valley Politics. See you next time.